I built this shiny hunting bot for the Switch so that it could find all sorts of shiny Pokemon in FireRed and LeafGreen. And I had a lot of people asking me how I did it. So today I'm going to be going through step by step everything that you'll need to automate shiny hunting, or anything for that matter, with just a few key components. So let's get straight into it. So first things first, let's talk about that bot that I showed off in the original video, because to tell the truth, it kinda sucked. You see, it sent commands to the Switch by spoofing a controller over Bluetooth, and while this worked quite nicely, it's a bit of a pain to set up, it takes a while to connect, it would sometimes require manual pairing, and the worst issue, which may depend entirely on your device and Bluetooth adapter, it would crash over and over again and would need to be manually reset all the time. On average, it managed to get between 100 and 1,000 loops before it would crash outright and I'd have to reset it, which for most things is probably fine, but when it's a shiny bot, which can take tens of thousands of encounters sometimes, it's not ideal. I also had issues with specific sequences, like soft resetting for shiny starters, where you have to press the buttons in exactly the right order, or else it's just going to get stuck somewhere, because it would randomly drop inputs and end up on a completely different screen, mistake something else for a shiny check. Like I said, this could be more of an issue with my device. I was using a Pi 3B, which is a decade old at this point, so if you have something newer, your mileage may vary. This whole approach was fine for me making the video, because I can just put up with the issues and edit around them, but for those looking to give it a try, it's not ideal. So I made a new version, and here is everything you'll need to build it yourself. Quick note, there are of course multiple ways to build the same bot, this is just one that worked for me. First things first, you're obviously going to need a Switch and a copy of Pokemon FireRed or LeafGreen. You can also use this bot for other Pokemon games, or other games in general, but these sequences aren't included here, you'll have to make them yourself. We'll get into that later. Please note that a Switch Lite will not work for this system as it doesn't have any video output. There are mods for this, but chances are you don't have that installed. You'll also need to put the Switch in its dock. Next, you're going to need an HDMI capture card. Now, this one I'm using here is a very basic Ugreen card that's about €15, so $17 or so. You can find cheap ones like this on Amazon, or step up to about the 30 range for one that has HDMI pass-through. I'd recommend going for the pass-through so you can actually see the game running in real time. Obviously, if you have a more premium option, that's even better, but for the bot, the quality doesn't really matter at all, as it downscales the footage anyway. All of the processing for this bot is run through one of these, a Raspberry Pi. This is the most expensive part of the setup, especially as Pi prices have risen massively over the last few years, but they are great for projects like this. Now, this is a Raspberry Pi 3B, which handles the bot just fine. However, I would highly recommend getting a Pi 4 or 5 or something equivalent that has a good USB controller, because this is where the bot setup will differ. If you have a good Pi and a good capture card that works well together, everything can be done locally on the Pi. If not, there's an extra step, and that requires a PC or laptop to act as a middleman. I'm going to assume you have one of these available. The next piece you're going to need is an Arduino Micro or Leonardo board. They both work just the same, but I recommend going for a micro clone like this one here, because they're only about €7 and you don't need the full-size board. If you don't have access to a soldering iron, please make sure you get an Arduino that has the pins pre-soldered here, as some come without this. And finally, you're going to need all of the cables to connect everything together. Obviously, you need the HDMI and any USB cables for your capture card, a good power supply for the Raspberry Pi so that it's working properly, an Ethernet cable for the Pi if it's not connected over Wi-Fi, and a USB A to C cable for the Arduino. Those are all pretty standard, but the last thing you're going to need is a way to connect the Raspberry Pi to the Arduino, and the simplest way to do that is with some DuPont wires. These wires simply slot onto the pins for an easy connection. You only need 3 of these in total, but you'll probably have to buy a pack of 100 or so if you don't already have them. In my version, I built this very basic, very janky looking hat connector that just slots them together so that it's not hanging off the side and there's no risk of it disconnecting or being plugged into the wrong place. So let's set everything up. Attach your capture card to the Switch's HDMI output, and if you have it, pass it through to your monitor. Leave the USB cable loose for now. Plug in the Raspberry Pi and follow the instructions online to install either the official Raspberry Pi OS or one of your choosing. For my build, I've installed the headless version of the OS, which means there's no desktop or anything visual, everything is run through the command line. You can either set your Raspberry Pi up with its own keyboard, mouse and monitor, and you'll probably want to if you've got the full desktop installed, but what I like to do is simply control it by using SSH to remotely access it through my PC. It's just a lot easier and a lot cleaner than messing around with extra cables and swapping inputs around. That's up to you. And now, let's set up the Arduino. Plug it into your PC, download the Arduino IDE if you haven't got that already, and then go to the link in the description for the Arduino Joy-Con library. Click the green code button and download as a zip file. Create a new file in the IDE, go to the sketch button at the top, and include the library you just downloaded from the zip. Now, go into your system files, go to App Data, Local, Arduino, Packages, Arduino, Hardware, AVR 1.8.7 and find the boards.txt file. At the very bottom of this file, paste in this block from the GitHub page. This is all of the board info that has the correct addresses and settings for the switch to actually recognize it. Also in this same location, open up the platform.txt file, go down to build.usb_manufacturer and change it to Horico Ltd as stated on the GitHub repo. You may want to back up the original boards and platform files just in case. Close the Arduino IDE and open it up again. On the board drop down here, you should see your board currently selected. Click the drop down and look for Switch Joystick, the board you've just created, and it should now appear. Finally, grab the sketch from my GitHub repo and paste it in, and then verify and upload the file to the Arduino. If all goes well, this Arduino can now take in commands and send them to the Switch. Unplug it from your PC, and now you need to connect it to your Pi. The 3 pins you need to connect from the Pi to the Arduino are TX, RX, and ground. And luckily, all 3 of these are right next to each other on both boards, at least in my case. With the Pi oriented like this, the pins you need are the 3rd, 4th, and 5th ones down on the right. These top 2 are 5-volt power, ignore those, and then connect some 2-pump wires into these 3 like so. The first one is ground, the second one is TX, and the third one is RX. On the Arduino, you'll have to look at the pinout to find these 3, as it may differ depending on your board's design. For this Pro Micro clone, I can see the TX, RX, and ground are these 3 pins here next to the USB port. However, on the official Arduino Micro, I believe they're on the other side, so make sure you can find the correct pins. To connect them together, ground needs to go to ground. However, the TX and RX pins need to cross over each other. So TX on the Pi goes to RX on the Arduino and vice versa. This is because the T and R stand for transmit and receive. So the TX pin transmits to the RX pin and they're not just shouting at each other. With those 3 pins connected, the Pi is ready to send signals to the Arduino. As I said earlier, I'm using SSH to access my Pi, so if you're doing the same, this is the process. In the Windows terminal or PowerShell, type in SSH and then the local IP address of your Pi. It then asks for a password, just type that in. You should have set all this user stuff up earlier. On the Pi, you need to copy over the files from the GitHub repo. So you can either download them from a browser, copy them from your PC with something like SCP, or use Git by typing git clone and then the URL for the switch bot. This will copy everything into a new folder. If you're new to Raspberry Pis or Linux systems in general, and at any point you get a message that says module not found or something like that, this means that you need to install a package first. Just look up the command you'll need to install them. It should be a very simple process by using apt or pip. Now that the bot is on your Pi, there's only a couple of settings to change, and this is where the extra step comes in if your Pi doesn't detect the capture card. First, plug your capture card into one of the Pi's USB ports. Go into the bots folder by typing cd switch shinybot, the name of the folder, and then run the basic capture test by typing python testcap.py. If you see that it says images captured successfully, then it was able to read your capture card just fine. Check this is the case by going into the screenshots folder and having a look at the test files it saved. Because I'm running a headless Pi, what I do is simply copy the screenshots folder to my PC anytime I need to check it, by opening a new tab in the terminal and typing out scp-r and then the address and path of the screenshots folder and the address I want it to go to on my PC, like this. You should see all of your files in here, and if not, you're going to need to use another device as a middleman. Unplug the capture card from the Pi and plug it into your PC. Install OBS if you haven't got it already, and download the RTSP server plugin linked in the description. Add the capture card as a source, make sure it's scaled to the screen, and in the settings, reduce the output to something manageable. For mine, it's set to 1000 kilobits per second, 720p, and 20 FPS. Then at the top, in Tools, click on the RTSP server and start the stream. This address here is what you're going to need to set on the Pi to read the stream. Now that you've got your game captured nicely, on the Raspberry Pi, you need to set the stream's location in the ShinyBot. Type in nano wiredswitchbot.py to open up the code. Scroll down to the stream_path parameter and type in either your capture card's local address, which is most likely /dev/video0. You can check this by typing this command into your Pi, or if you're using the stream, set it to the RTSP stream address, which is shown in OBS. Make sure to replace the localhost word with the PC's local IP address. With that in place, press Ctrl S to save, Ctrl X to exit Nano. And now, you're all set up. Now, I want to take a few minutes to talk about RNG and how this game handles the generation of Pokemon. In a very oversimplified way, the game starts at an initial random seed, and then advances that seed every single frame. The seed comes from a linear list, so it will always move in the same direction, but will start at a different point. Now, depending on the game, this initial seed is generated in a different manner, which greatly impacts the bot. For Ruby and Sapphire, for example, the cartridge had a battery included, which would allow the seed to use the real-time clock and advance constantly, which meant that it was almost guaranteed to have a different initial seed every single time you started the game up. And Emerald, which is well known for its broken RNG, was probably supposed to have this same system, however Emerald will always start at the exact same seed no matter what. This meant that you could reliably hit the same outcome every time, which is not ideal for shiny hunting, unless you use an external tool to calculate outcomes, because then you can guarantee a shiny frame at a specific time. But FireRed and LeafGreen are slightly different. They didn't include a battery in the cartridge and have no time-based features, which means that they can't base the RNG off of the clock. And instead how it works is that the initial seed is based off of the way that the game is loaded up. Before you get to your save file, the game is randomly spinning a seed, and this is affected by frame advances, button presses, and the length of button presses. As soon as the game loads from the main menu into the save screen, that value is locked in and then advances like normal. This means that with a bot loading up the game with precise inputs, you will always hit the same group of seeds. Hitting the same grouping over and over again will drastically decrease your chances of finding a shiny Pokemon, as it's likely that a shiny frame doesn't exist in that group. Shininess is determined by a combination of your trainer ID, secret ID, and part of the Pokemon's generated personality value. The first two don't change, so it's only the personality value to look at. This is a 32-bit value, or a value in the range of 0 to 4,294,967,295. This determines everything about a Pokemon, like their gender, stats, ability, nature, and so on, and is used in that shiny check. And if you are only generating a handful of seeds for the random number generator, you'll always come out with the same personality values, which means you'll always come out with the same results for it being shiny or not. Initially, I designed my shiny bot to be as efficient as possible by reducing the delays between buttons to be precise, which works perfectly for random encounters, but not for soft resets. So I decided to run a little experiment which I'd call thorough, some may call excessive. I added a new feature to the bot to simply save a screenshot within a sequence, and made the starter hunt take a screenshot of the summary page of every single Squirtle. I then typed out each stat for every single one, and in Google Sheets, I set up a rule to highlight any duplicate entries. My first round saw 7 duplicate entries out of 100 total. The second round had only 4 duplicates, however one of them landed 3 times, which seemed excessive. For the third round, I added the Pokemon's nature into the test, as the same stats can appear multiple times without being a duplicate if they have a different nature. In this round, it managed to hit 275 unique combinations in 300 Squirtles. While this does mean that 25 were duplicates, it's important to note that even if a Pokemon has the same gender, nature, and stats, it doesn't mean that it is identical. At such a low level, IVs don't have much of an effect on stats, as the values are so low that they round into the same few amounts. Going off of my data, the most average Squirtle you can have is a male that has 20 health, 10 attack, 12 defense, 10 special attack, 12 special defense, and 9 speed. These were the most common values in each category across the 300, and I found 4 Squirtle that match these exact values, 2 of them being docile and 2 being serious, which are both neutral natures that don't affect stats at all, so fundamentally the same. Now this could mean that these 4 Squirtles all have the same IVs. However, because of the stat rounding, there's actually a massive range that their IVs could be, while still being this way. Using an IV calculator, I can see that a Pokemon could have a total IV count of anywhere from 38 to 146, which is a massive spread. So duplicates in my data aren't necessarily an issue, and as I was able to hit 275 unique values, I was confident that these results showed that the bot was set up to handle the game's interesting RNG. I achieved this by initially adding short, random delays between the button presses on the menu, which should affect the initial seed. And then I also added a loop before the game loads to randomly press the D-pad a few times, as according to other posts, that also affects the seed. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it also adds a time delay to it from the button press, so it's working in a sense, even if pressing the D-pad specifically doesn't do anything. With all that out the way, the encounters should now be truly random. Before you can start hunting for shinies, you need to make sure the game is set up in the correct position. For random encounters, you want to walk into a patch of grass that you want to hunt in, and try to find an area that you can wedge yourself against a wall if possible. When the bot moves, it only taps the buttons, so your character should only turn to face that direction. However, if you get into an encounter, and then the first command is the same direction, you'll take a step. By default, the random encounter is set up to walk left, then right, then up, then down, which means it can only step left if that happens. For most places this is fine, however I also added a block direction feature, so then right would be the only one. Or you could just edit the sequence to put whatever direction the wall is first, like I did for Route 8, where I just set the first direction to up, as there's a fence to walk into. When here, save your game, make sure you don't have a shiny as the lead Pokemon, as that slows everything down, have the text set to fast and have the battle animations off, and then reset the pause menu so that it's hovering over the Pokédex at the top. Now you're ready to run the bot. Plug the USB cable in from your Arduino to the Switch. Hit the home button on the Joy-Con and go to the controller menu, and then change grip/order. Now run the bot by typing in python wiredswitchbot.py. That'll start the controller and you should see a USB controller appear. It will then automatically load up the game and then prompt you to select your hunt. The first field is which game you're playing, so FRLG for FireRed LeafGreen, RE for random encounters, and then the Pokemon you're targeting, so that it can name the screenshots correctly. Whether or not you want to block a direction, if so, type in up, down, left or right, and then whether or not you want to save regularly to get an accurate in-game time, or add to the daycare steps for example. And now you should see the bot start hunting away. Currently, the bot has sequences for the starter Pokemon, random encounters, Snorlax, and the gift Eevee, but you may want to create your own sequences, like purchasing the gift Magikarp, fishing in some water, or soft resetting for Deoxys. Well, I've made it pretty easy to set up new sequences. Open the sequences.csv file with Nano, and in here you can see the existing ones. Just add a new line, type out FRLG for the game, the name of your method, and then here's where you type out your sequence. For all of the button commands, you just type the button's name in lowercase. For set commands, you type out the command like reset or check. Type in a number to add a delay to the bot, like 2.5 will add a 2.5 second delay between those commands. And finally, use loop and end to create loops inside the sequence, just like how the random encounters work. By using loop left encounter, right encounter, end, for example, will loop until encounter returns true, which means a wild Pokemon battle has started, and the loop will break, moving on to the next command after end. And of course, once it reaches the end of the sequence, it loops back to the beginning to do it all over again unless a shiny is found. You can find a full description of these commands on my GitHub page. Now, there's a few things to consider with this bot. As it is all based on timings, your mileage may vary when it comes to the exact seconds, and you may need to change some values. If you notice that it's detecting a shiny when there isn't one, for example, you may need to increase the shiny check delay in the code found here. I added a few sanity checks to the code so that it saves frames at specific times to see if it's in the correct place. If you look in the screenshots folder, you should see a few images that show these steps. First is the encounter check. These should all be black squares. If you see that the encounter_original frame wasn't taken when the game fades to black between encounters, then it's detected that the screen was too dark when it wasn't supposed to. To fix this, you may simply have to increase your switch's brightness or play around with the threshold levels in the code. How the program actually looks at the screen is that it crops a specific area and then applies a black-white threshold to it, where any pixel brighter than a certain amount is made white and the rest are set to black. And then it simply works out the percentage of white pixels and if it's above or below the set threshold. Because this is looking for a completely black screen, the threshold is set very low, so only the darkest pixels become black, and the white percentage that's allowed is also set very low. So try playing around with these values to see what works. The next step is the shiny check, and here you've got a few frames. The first two are shiny pre-check and shiny raw. What you should see here is that the pre-check frame is taken when the Pokemon is about halfway across the screen, and the second one is taken when the Pokemon has settled and the text at the bottom has appeared. If that's the case, then that's fine. And then you've got the shiny crop and shiny check. For these, you should see it's cropped to the Pokemon's name, and the shiny check should have set the background to black and the text to white. If that's all looking good, then you've just got to wait for the bot to find a shiny. Once it does, it saves a highlight of it appearing, takes a screenshot, and holds the program until you come in and catch it. To take control of the game, simply unplug the bot's USB cable, or take the Switch out of the dock and play in handheld mode. This will automatically switch the controls back to your Joy-Cons. Anytime you want to start the shiny bot, as long as it's the only controller plugged in, it should assume control in-game. Otherwise, just go back to the change grip/order menu and reset it there. And that is how to build a shiny bot. Working on this project was so fun, and because I used code from my original DS builds, the sequences are in place for when Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald are released on the Switch. And as the FireRed LeafGreen emulator has trading support for them, that's almost guaranteed. Here's a quick rundown of all the shinies it has found so far. I started early and found 2 Caterpie, a Rattata and a Sandshrew through random encounters, before actually playing the game myself. I then wanted to hunt for a Snorlax, which was for some reason the worst mistake I could have made. I left my bot hunting Snorlax for so long, and currently that hunt is up to 23,000 resets without anything to show for it. During this time, I took a break and decided to set it up in the Pokemon Tower instead, and of course within 90 minutes it found a shiny Haunter, which was crazy. I tested out the first summary hunt with the Gift Eevee, where it instead checks for the shiny star on the summary page, and after only 196 resets, it found it. After another round of Snorlax fails, I tried it in the Safari Zone, where I found some golden eggs. Unfortunately, as it is the Safari Zone, they fled after breaking out of every ball. And while I was editing this video, it also found a shiny Pidgey on Route 8, who I named Burb. I'm sure that Snorlax is coming any day now. So, try it out yourself and see what you can find. If you have any issues with the shiny bot at any stage, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try to help you out as much as possible. I hope you enjoy watching your bot hunt away for all those elusive shinies. And while it works, maybe you can do something productive with your time, like finding a shiny Chikorita in Soul Silver, or finding a shiny Doduo and Oddish in Let's Go, or make an entire video about shinies. My god, it's shiny Pokemon all the way down. But anyway, thank you for watching, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new, comment down below what shinies you're going to be hunting for, consider checking out my Patreon page for some extra stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.